first off, when in history did this take place? That's a really important question. And in order to know this, you need to know Jewish history on one foot. The Jews left Egypt. We were slaves there for 210 years. We were slaves, and then God took us out with a mighty hand and gave us the Torah. How many years ago did he give us the Torah? I don't know if we mentioned it in a different class, but we were given the Torah 3,333 years ago. I think we did mention it. 3333. That's how many years? You'll have to wait another 1,111 years for that number to once again pop up. So 3,333 years, we got the Torah. Then we wandered the desert for 40 years. There was a story of the spies. It was a very sad story, and the Jews were not allowed into Israel right away. But eventually, when we were allowed into Israel, after 40 years, we went. It took us 7 years to conquer the land from the Canaanites. And then we were in Israel during the time of the prophets for just around 500 years. Okay? At that time, there was no temple. We had something called the tabernacle, which is called in Hebrew the Mishkan. And there was 500 very, very interesting years of Jewish history. Near the end of those 500 years, we got our first king. So understand that we did not have a king for over 400 years. The Jewish people remained without an absolute ruler. We were self-governed. It was a thing of beauty. We had sages, we had prophets, we had judges, but we did not have a rulership. Eventually, the Jewish people decided, hey, we want a king. And there was a king named King Saul, who was a king for a very brief amount of time. And then King David. And King David was made king a little less than 500 years ago. He lived exactly 70 years. And after 70 years, his son Solomon took over. And then Solomon built the temple. So we're not getting exact per year, but just in general, we left Egypt 3,333 years ago, wandered the desert for 40 years, got into Israel, and we lived there for 500 years. King Solomon comes and builds the first temple. And that first temple lasted for 410 years. Okay, so now we were in Israel for about 910 years. At that point, the Babylonians came, and the Babylonians destroyed the first temple. It's a very, very sad incident in Jewish history. They burnt the first temple, and the Jewish people were exiled out of Israel for 70 years, 7-0. During those 70 years is when the story of Purim happened. During the 70 years after the Jewish people were exiled. Now, the Jewish people came back to Israel, and they built the second temple. That second temple lasted for 420 years, and then it was destroyed by the Romans, and it was destroyed just under 2,000 years ago, and now we're at the end of that 2,000-year period. Okay, so now you know all of Jewish history in a nutshell. Let's just review this so that you'll know Jewish history. It's that simple. That's a whole semester in 3 minutes. Left Egypt 3,333. We received the Torah, wandered the desert for 40 years, went into Israel and lived. We had conquered the land. We lived beautifully, gloriously for about 500 years. We then built the first temple. We had another glorious 410 years. Then we were exiled by the Babylonians for 70 years. We rebuilt the temple and by Ezra and Nehemiah rebuilt the temple, and that lasted for 420 years. Then we were exiled by the Romans for 2,000 years, and that's where we are today, the end of that 2,000-year exile. That's all of Jewish history. That's what you got to know. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Now, during those 70 years, the Jewish people were in turmoil. We had a temple, miracles happened, we were so happy. And then we were exiled, and many, many, many Jews were murdered by the Babylonians. And during that 70-year period, the Babylonians after they conquered Israel, they went downhill in history, and they were taken over by the Persians. And Persia became the new Babylon. And the granddaughter of the king of Babylon ended up marrying the king of Persia. And Persia became the superpower of its day. The king of that time, his name was Achashverosh. Achashverosh was the king over 127 countries, which was essentially all of the civilized world at that time. And there's a great question about whether he deserved to be king. Some say he came from royalty, but most say he did not come from royalty. He happened upon wealth, and he was a commoner. And it's because of that he ended up marrying the granddaughter of the king of Babylon in order to give himself legitimacy. Wow, I'm also royalty. Look, I married royalty. But behind his back, people would say, hey, he's not really king material. He was a commoner who became wealthy. And that always bothered Achashverosh. And there's a little bit of a theme throughout the Megillah with he had this chip on his shoulder that he didn't really deserve to be king. So one day the king says, I'm going to prove that I am the king on my own merit. I am going to show I'm the absolute ruler. So he did a few things. One thing that he did was he moved the capital from where it was in Babylon to a place called Shushan. And he made Shushan the capital of basically the modern world. Now, when you move the capital, that's like a boss move. They're like, I'm going to move Washington, D.C. to Kentucky. Like, who can do that? Well, that's what Achashverosh did. So he wanted to show he was very powerful. Then the next thing he did was he called in his ministers and he said, I am going to show how powerful I am. I'm going to make a party for the entire world. I'm going to invite everyone to this party. All 127 countries are going to be invited. Their ministers, their officers are going to come. And this is going to be a party like no other. And he made a party for 180 days. His ministers were not happy about that. It depleted the coffers, but he didn't care. If he could show, like, I am the one who holds the parties. The wealth of the kingdom is my personal wealth. I'm going to use it as I see fit. That was his way of imposing. Now, he did something interesting. Normally, if you're making a big party, you invite your officers and the people in your city first, because they're the ones around you. You got to protect yourself from them. You got to endear yourself to them. But he didn't do that. He actually waited to invite his generals and his officers, personal officers, and his capital city all the way till the end. Again, power moves. Everything is about power. And he invited everyone to come, everyone coming to the party. And these parties were all over the top, gorgeous, meat and wine. And it's interesting because in those days, the law was that if you went to a party and they filled up your cup with wine, you had to drink it. And by the way, if they wanted you out of there, that they weren't really happy, they would keep filling up your cup until either you died of alcohol poisoning or you just collapsed. And pouring you more drinks is how they showed you they wanted you to leave. They forced you to drink. Interestingly enough, Islam does the same thing today, but with coffee. That's actually an Islamic custom where if you come as a guest, they'll serve you one cup. If they serve you a second cup, it could be they like you, but you're not sure. If they serve you a third cup, it means they want you gone because the coffee is very bitter. And drinking 3 cups will make you way too jittery. So that's an interesting little tidbit. So in those days, it was with wine. They would make you drink. So in his party, he actually made a rule. Nobody can force anyone to drink. And that was sort of a big deal in those days. Anyone could drink as much as they wanted. I don't have to tell you about the entertainment there, but let's call it less than modest. And one of the big things that he did was he took the vessels of the Jewish temple and he used them as his utensils for pouring and serving. Now, quick little history. When the Jewish people were exiled, there was a prophecy that 70 years after they were exiled, they're going to be brought back to their land. And the question was, when do those 70 years begin? And everyone tried to figure out, well, people knew Jews were serious. And when they had a prophecy, you got to watch out for it. So all the secular kings knew about this 70-year prophecy. But the question is, when did it begin? Did it begin from the destruction of the temple? Did it begin from when the Jews were exiled? No one quite knew. So the king, he did his own little calculation. And in his calculation, the 70 years were up. So he's got nothing to fear about the Jewish God and Jewish God's wrath. So he took out the golden vessels of the temple and he used them. Really embarrassing to us. Embarrassing to God, embarrassing to the Jewish people, right? Okay. After the 180-day party, he then said, I am going to make a new party for 7 more days, and this party is going to be for my officers. And this party is going to be for everyone in the capital city. Yeah, they come last, but I'm going to treat them really nicely. And he invited all of them, and he made sure that the invitation went even to the Jewish people. The Jewish people were invited. The Jewish people from Shushan were invited to the party. Now, think about this for a moment. You got this king. He is uber powerful, and he is inviting everyone to his party. The Jews said, should we go or shouldn't we go? And they went to the great tzaddik of the time. What's a tzaddik? Very righteous person. And his name was Mordechai. And they said to Mordechai, should we go to this party? After all, the king is inviting us. We don't want to insult the king. And Mordechai said, absolutely no. You can't go. Number one, it's going to be incredibly immodest. It's not a place for a Jew. You're going to go, you're just going to be, let's be honest, there's going to be strippers, there's going to be drunken, there's going to be debauchery, it's going to be what you would expect a Persian party to be. And on top of that, they're using golden vessels that came from your temple. What are you going to do? You're going to go to a party and eat out of the golden vessels from the temple that was destroyed? That's an embarrassment to you? Absolutely don't go. So some Jews listened to Mordechai, but others said, he doesn't quite understand the political ramifications of us not attending. We're going to attend. And unfortunately, many Jews attended the party. And they ate from the vessels of the temple. And yeah, it's true. Achashverosh promised, don't worry, there'll be kosher food. But kosher food is not the beginning and the end of attending a party. Obviously, if there would be non-kosher food, it would be simple. Of course, we're not going to go. But no, he said, no, kosher food, don't worry about it. We'll make you comfortable, we'll make you at ease. And Mordechai said, still don't go. It's not where a Jew belongs. Okay, remember that part of the story? Now we get up to chapter 2. Well, it was during this 7-day party, and the king is utterly drunk. And his officers are drunk, and they are just knocking down cup after cup. And they get into a conversation, and what do men often converse about? Especially drunk guys? Women. And they're speaking about who are the most beautiful women in the world. That's a conversation. Which country has the most beautiful women? Who is, a bunch of drunk guys? That's what they're talking about. And then Achashverosh, the king, says the following statement. You guys don't even realize the most beautiful woman in the world is my wife, the granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. Her beauty surpasses all. They said, well, of course, she's beautiful, but look, maybe she's not the most. Besides, where is she? Where is she? We haven't seen her. Where was this granddaughter of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, who Achashverosh married? Where was she? Listen carefully, this is so interesting. She was not at the party because she made a party of her own. Why'd she make a party of her own? Achashverosh was trying to make a statement. His statement was, I am king because I am king. Not because I'm married the granddaughter of a king. I'm the king because I'm the king. I am powerful. I am worthy. So his wife, whose name was, ready, Vashti, that was her name. Vashti said, my husband's a kook. He's a megalomaniac. He thinks he is king because he has his own merit. He was a commoner. I'm not coming to his party. I'm going to make my own party. So watch what's going on here. Achashverosh had just spent a fortune to make his party. Meanwhile, Vashti makes her own party, and she invites all of her close friends. So they said, where is your wife Vashti? You say she's so beautiful. Show her to us. So the king gave the following order. The king said, you know what? She's not going to make me look bad. I'm going to order her to leave her party, come to my party. She is going to come to my party wearing no clothes. All I want her to wear is the crown on her head. But she's going to parade herself completely naked in front of all of you. You will see, number one, she's the most beautiful. You will see that she doesn't have her dignity. She is only important because she married me. And that's why she's queen. I don't care that her grandfather was. She's important because of me. And she is at my disposal. She could do whatever. She's going to do whatever I want her to do. Wow, there's a little power thing going on. So the messenger goes to Vashti's party. Vashti sees the messenger. And the messenger says, your husband is summoning you to come to his party, by the way, wearing nothing but a crown, but nothing else. So Vashti says, is he drunk? He's drunk. He's drunk. He wants me to come. What is he, crazy? He's like, my grandfather, the king of Babylon, he could hold his alcohol. This king, a little bit of a drunk, a little bit of wine, and he's inviting his queen to come. It's awful. Tell him I'm not coming. You're not, no, I'm not coming. So the messenger came back, and in front of the king, in front of all of his important officers and friends, he says, the queen says she's not coming. And everyone went, ooh, she's not coming. Now we see who's boss. And the king's face turned red, like he was so embarrassed, and he didn't know what to do with himself. What is he? His wife just embarrassed him in front of the whole kingdom. And really, you know what she really did? She really undid the past 187 days. Because those days were there to prove that he's important. And in one backhanded motion, boom, she said, no, you're not important. You're important because of me, and I'm not listening to you. And he was livid and drunk. He didn't know what to do. He calls in his 7 closest advisors. He brings them to a little conference room, and he says, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? She embarrasses me in front of everyone. I got to do something. Now, he had lots of advisors, but he had one advisor who was the youngest member in the room. The youngest advisor, whose name was Memuchan. But Memuchan had another name. The other name was Haman. Same person. And he was the youngest person. The Talmud says the youngest person is supposed to be the last one in the room to speak, not the first one. But he didn't have any sense of a decorum, any sense of, honor to somebody who's more experienced. Right away shoots off his mouth. He says, you know what you got to do? Here's what you have to do. You've got to teach her a lesson, and you've got to make an example of her. You should take Vashti, your wife who said no to you, and you should kill her. Kill her. Just destroy her. And announce to everyone that you're killing her, and that everyone from now on has to be ultra careful that when their husband says something, they'd better darn well listen. So the king, in his drunkenness, said, so be it. The guards come to Vashti's party. They handcuff Vashti. They bring her to the king's palace, and then they put her to death. Vashti's dead. Chapter 3. The king sobers up. He says, I'm in the mood of seeing my wife. Go call Vashti. And the officers, I don't know how to break this to you, but you had her killed. He said, what? Yeah, why would I have her killed? And they tell the whole story. Who advised me to kill her? This guy, Memuchan, Haman, he said that was his advice. So Achashverosh filed that away in the back of his mind. He wasn't happy about that. Meanwhile, he got depressed because, he loved Vashti, and he was convinced to kill her while he was drunk. And when the king is depressed, when the king is feeling down, it's bad for the whole kingdom. Like, heads are going to roll. So right away, the advisors said, we got to think of something to make the king feel better. So they said to the king, you know what you need to do? You need to find a new wife, but don't pick royalty again, because if you pick royalty, the same thing is going to happen. The person from royalty may not listen to you. Pick a commoner. The more common, the better. Have a beauty contest. Say anyone who's available, they should come, and you have a chance to be the next queen of Persia, the next queen of the world, basically. And the king said, that's a great idea. And he sent out word, everyone who wants to come. And after a while, he didn't say anyone who wants to come, but everyone who is available must come. And all of these young ladies were found by the officers and brought to the royal court. Beautiful ladies, and they were kept by a special person whose job it was to oversee the women who the king would meet up. Now, these women did not go right into the king. Many of them were poor. They smelled terrible. They weren't elegant, and they had to be groomed. Well, that's a bad word today, but maybe it was then also. They had to be prepared to approach the king. And it took up to a year to soak in different kinds of perfumes and oils until their skin was soft, until they smelled good. And then, when their night came, they were able to ask for anything from the person who was in charge of the ladies. This kind of jewelry, this designer dress, whatever they wanted. And then they would spend a night with the king. So the king bedded each of these women one per night. The only thing is, if they were not chosen, they were never allowed to marry anyone else. Because once the king sleeps with someone, then they're off limits to everyone else forever. And they become part of the king's harem. So it was a very risky thing because they could never get married afterwards. Now, there was a young lady, and her name was Esther. And Esther was a Jewess. She actually did come from royalty. She came from King Saul. Her uncle was a man by the name of Mordechai, the same great tzaddik that we had mentioned earlier, who said, don't go to the party. And of course, Esther, she doesn't want to marry the king. He's not Jewish. He murdered his wife. He clearly is somebody who's got issues, and she would never marry such a person. Some commentaries even say that she was actually married to Mordechai at the time. There's disagreement, but either way, she did not want to marry the king. And Mordechai eventually hid her so that the king's officers shouldn't find her. However, the king's officers heard a rumor that this beautiful lady not just exists, but lives in the city of Shushan, where the king is, not all the way in another country, but lives right near the palace. They found her. They grabbed her, and they brought her to that chamber where all the women are kept. As they're taking her away, Mordechai said, listen, I'm going to give you advice, and I want you to listen to this advice. Do not tell anyone you're Jewish. You're going to go there. There's going to be thousands of ladies there. Don't tell anyone that you're Jewish. You'll understand why later. Don't say a word. Esther comes, and she is very reluctant. She doesn't want to engage with the other women. When the person who is in charge of all the women sees Esther, the moment he sees her, he realizes this is the future queen. Forget about everyone else. He knows it. The Talmud actually says something interesting. The Talmud says she wasn't necessarily the most beautiful lady. It even says that Esther had a little bit of an olive green complexion. But Hashem wanted her to be beautiful. Hashem wanted people to see Esther and be captivated by her. And so they were. And everyone wanted to know, Esther, where are you from? Who are you? Esther would refuse to tell anyone anything. Finally, the day came, and it was Esther's turn to appear in front of the queen. And they said to Esther, what would you like? You could choose any jewelry that you want, any dress, any gown. What would you like to appear in front of the queen, in front of the king? And Esther said, I want nothing. She didn't want to make herself attractive because she did not want to marry this king. However, she came in front of the king, and instantly and immediately the king was smitten by the beautiful Esther. And after being with Esther that evening, he sent all the other women home. And he made Esther the queen. He declared her instead of Vashti. Well, as time went on, the king was curious. Who is this lady? And he said, who are you? Where are you from? And she deferred. She didn't say. And the king was a little bit nervous. Like, who is this lady Esther? Maybe she's actually like a bastard child. How terrible would it be if the king marries a bastard girl who doesn't know who her parents are? The truth is, Esther was an orphan. She was brought up by her uncle Mordechai because her parents had both passed away. But the king wanted to know who she was. And the king even made parties for the nation that would say that, wow, yes, Esther's one of ours. And you know what happened? A lot of nations said, yeah, she looks Asian, she looks Greek, she looks African, she looks Norwegian. Esther had that kind of look that could have been from anywhere. But Esther never said where she's from. Okay. Chapter 4. It's sort of like a side note, but an important chapter 4 side note. There were two people who did not like the king. Their names were Bigsan and Seresh. And they decided they're going to poison the king. And they were talking in the courtyard. And they were discussing their plot to kill the king. And Mordechai was there in the courtyard. And Mordechai heard their plot. Now, they were speaking loudly, but they assumed that this Jew, Mordechai, did not know the language that they were speaking in, because they were speaking in a very obscure language called Tarshish. However, Mordechai did know that language because he belonged to the high court, the Jewish high court called the Sanhedrin. And in the Sanhedrin, if you belonged to the Sanhedrin, you had to be familiar with all 70 major languages that existed, including Tarshi. And he understood about this plot. And he messaged his niece Esther in the palace, and he messaged her, by the way, there's two people, Bigsan and Seresh, that are plotting to kill the king. And the queen went to the king and told the king that that this person, she didn't say my uncle, she said Mordechai, this person who is in the palace, who was in the courtyard, he heard that these two people are plotting to poison you. And when the dish was brought out, that was a poisoned dish, the king said, Bigsan and Seresh, how about you guys try it first? And they said, no, we don't want to try. You know why you don't want to try? Because you have poisoned it. And they were executed. And the king wrote in his book of records, Mordechai, the Jew, saved my life. And he put the book of records away. Chapter 5. Okay, you all following? Now everything is set up. what we've done right now in the book of Esther is we've set all the wheels in motion for the next thing that's going to happen. The next thing that happens is the king decides to elevate his advisor, Haman. Haman, remember that guy who advised him to kill the queen? Why did he elevate him? Well, he elevated him for a few reasons, but one of the reasons was, you know, there's an expression, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. Well, Haman, this person, he knew Haman had a lot of power, but he also understood that Haman could be a threat to him. But he also knew that Haman could get things done. Either way, he decided to make Haman very powerful, his chief officer, which was basically second to the king. Very, very powerful. And Haman, so full of this power, had this idea. Now, you have to understand who Haman was. Haman was known as Haman the Agagi. What's Agagi? Agagi came from the word Agagi, comes from the word Agag. Agag was the name of a king of a nation called Amalek. The nation of Amalek is the most hated nation in all of Judaism. Who are the nation of Amalek? So listen carefully. When the Jewish people left Egypt, and we had been tortured for over 200 years, and God destroys the mighty Egyptians and takes this small little nation out miraculously, and the whole world was hailing the heroism of the Jewish people and the God of the Jews. Well, what should have been the most elevated, miraculous time suddenly came crashing down, because a nation from an unexpected source suddenly intercepted the Jewish people in their march towards Israel and fought them and tried to destroy them. Could you imagine that? For what the Jewish people had just been through, God miraculously saves them, and then you come and you ambush them to kill them? How cruel do you have to be? So Amalek is the mortal enemy of the Jewish people. There's a lot to be said about this, but many years later, God told the prophet Samuel, go and tell King Saul to wipe out Amalek. And he made war with Amalek, and he wiped out most of them. But he kept the king alive, because he figured royalty can't kill royalty. And the king's name was Agag. King Saul was punished for keeping King Agag alive. God told Samuel, tell Saul, you're not going to be king anymore. You did not listen to me. I said, wipe out all of Amalek. Saul felt bad, and the next day he killed Agag as well. Except that the night before Agag was killed, he ended up sleeping with a young lady who ended up having a child, who had a child, who had a child, who ended up having a child named Haman. So Haman, understand the history, Haman comes from this king, Agag, who came from Amalek, who attacked the Jewish people. Agag, the king of Amalek, was a mortal enemy of the Jews. So Haman, who was his grandson, declared himself a mortal enemy of the Jews. And that's why he's called Haman HaAgagi, Haman who came from King Agag. So Haman said, you know what? I'm going to destroy all the Jews. And he goes to Achashverosh and he says to the Achashverosh the following. He says, you know, there's one nation. They're weird. They're different. Look at their beards. Let's make a Netflix show about them. We'll call it Unorthodox. Let's show how strange they are and how they're all insular and they're radical, they're fanatics. And let's just, you know what? Let's not make a Netflix show about them. Let's just kill them already, because that's what happens when you make a Netflix show about somebody. You create hatred, and then eventually, if you hate somebody, it's not too many steps to destroy them. So I know I'm putting that parenthetically, FYI. But when you badmouth your own people in front of the world, you're sort of giving a green light to do more. Okay, so he said, you know what? Let's kill out the Jewish people. They're weird. They're different. You won't even miss them. And you know what? I'm going to pay. You're worried about taxes? I'm going to take lots of bars, 400,000. So many bars of silver. I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it to you, king, to fill up your coffers. And the king said, you know what? That's a good idea. We'll do that. But how are you going to kill all the Jews? He says, well, I'm going to figure it out. Just give me the okay. And the king said, here is my ring with a seal on it. You create the decree, and with that decree, it's going to be binding. I cannot even take it back. So the king decides, Haman decides, I'm going to create a Holocaust. There's not going to be a Dachau or Treblinka or an Auschwitz, but he thought of something even more sinister. And if you've never heard this, this is so troubling. You know how he's going to kill the Jews? He's going to write a decree. And the decree says that on a certain day in the calendar, every non-Jew in the world who kills their Jewish neighbor is then allowed to acquire all their possessions. Your next door neighbor's got a Lexus. You kill the neighbor, you get the Lexus and the car. And the house. Well, they didn't have Lexus in those days, but they may have had a lot of cattle. They may have had a lot of gold and silver. Basically, kill your neighbor, get his stuff. That's really vicious. See, the Nazis, they killed the Jews, but the officers and the government kept the artwork. It was a crime to take the Jewish treasure. But what Haman said is, I don't care about the treasure. You kill your neighbor, you get your neighbor's property. You get his belongings. And that's all it took. A decree like that was all it took. Can you imagine wherever you happen to live, if such a decree took place, especially if there's anti-Semitism? And Haman, to figure out which day he's going to do it on, he was superstitious. So he made a lottery. And you know how you say a lottery in Hebrew? Pur. So the name of the holiday is called Purim, the day of the lottery. Now you know. Purim, the day of the lottery. And he made a lottery, and the lottery came out on the month of Adar, on the 14th of the month. So he knew what day he wanted to do it, and he figured the fates would have it that he is going to kill out all the Jews that day. Now, it happened to be almost a year from when he made the lottery. He made the lottery in Nisan, and Nisan would be the first of the year, and Adar is the 12th month of the year. So maybe if the lottery would have fallen out in a month from then, he would have mobilized the forces right away. But instead, the non-Jewish world had a whole year to scheme, how am I going to take my next door neighbor's property? And the non-Jews would walk by the Jewish house and say, take good care of that lawn, manicure it, because that's going to be my lawn. And the Jews understood that things are really horrific. And he created all of these decrees in every language imaginable and sent it out all over the world. Kill the Jew, get his items, get his belongings, get his property. And when Mordechai heard this, Mordechai was despondent. Wow. The entire Jewish people were declared, it was hunting season on them. They were declared fair game. And Haman was happy. He was so joyous. He's going to kill out every Jew. He's going to take revenge for his grandfather Agag. It is the Amalek versus the Jew, and Amalek is finally going to succeed in wiping out the Jewish race, the Jewish religion, the Jewish people. Mordechai, he took off his clothing and put on sackcloth. He put ashes on his head and he began to wail and pray. And the Queen Esther was told, hey, you know, that guy that you're friendly with, Mordechai, they didn't know it was her uncle, because then they would know she's Jewish. But they knew she was close to Mordechai. That guy, Mordechai, something's up with him. He's outside. He's sitting in sackcloth. He's mourning. What's going on? So she sends a messenger. Mordechai, what's going on? And Mordechai says, the Jewish people were written up for total destruction, total annihilation. And he then says, you've got to go and save us. You've got to go to the king. You've got to tell the king the time is now. And Esther says, I can't go to the king. You see, even though she was the number one lady in the world and in the king's eyes, the king had many wives. He had a whole harem full of wives. He wasn't exactly, he was a little into polygamy, as it were, although Esther was his main wife. And there was a rule in Shushan, and the rule went as follows. You could not just walk in front of the king without being summoned. And if you came into the king's chamber and he didn't call you, didn't invite you, it was instant death. That was a rule in Persia. The only way out of that was if you came without permission, but the king were to lower his scepter and touch your head with the scepter, then the death penalty didn't apply to you. But usually the king just kept his hand at his side. He considered it a chutzpah to come in without being summoned, and you would die. And Esther sends back to Mordechai. She says, Mordechai, I would go into the king, but I wasn't summoned. As a matter of fact, he didn't summon me for the past 30 days. I don't know when's the next time I'm going to be summoned. And Mordechai sends back. Mordechai says, you've got to go. You've got to go into the king. Our lives are in mortal danger. If you don't save us, we're going to be saved one way or the other. But it's clear that this is why you were made queen. We never knew why. Why is a beautiful Jewess who's a holy person who wants to build a beautiful Jewish family have to marry this drunkard king? She doesn't want the power. She never wanted it. It must be that you are here for this moment to save all the Jewish people. So Esther says back, okay, I'll go in. But, she says, before I go in, I want to ask you to announce to all the Jewish people 3 days of prayer. Daven to Hashem, pray to God. Fast. Have a 3-day fast day. I don't know if they ate at night or not, but either way, it's brutal to fast for 3 days. Everyone should fast and pray for me, because when I walk into that chamber, if he doesn't raise that scepter, I'm dead and you lost your person on the inside. And all the Jewish people fasted and they prayed and they repented. And you know what they repented for, my friends? You know what they repented for? For going to that party. Mordechai told them, Hashem is upset. As a Jewish people, we went to that party where there was debauchery, where there was immodesty, where there was drunkenness. It's not where a Jew belongs, and you're eating out of the vessels of the temple that was destroyed. What a shame. What an embarrassment. Return to God. Tell me you want your previous level of holiness. And the Jewish people took it to heart. In 3 days they prayed and they fasted. And on the third day, Esther also fasted, by the way. And on the third day of her fast, she was so weak she could barely walk. But she put on her nicest robe. She put on her crown. And without being summoned, she opens the door. And as she walks in, all of the guards see her, and they know she wasn't summoned, and they're rubbing their hands together. They're already splitting up her items because they know she's going to be executed. I call her crown, I call her the dress, and the shoes, I'll give it to my wife. They know she's dead. And Esther comes in front of the King Ahasuerus. He sees her, and he's confused, and he's upset. The Talmud teaches that he would actually not have lowered the scepter and touched her head. It was an angel that pushed his hand down. But so he did, and he ended up touching her on the head with the scepter. She was not going to be killed. And then all of a sudden his heart was filled with love for her. And he said to her, Esther, you risked your life. You came here. What can I do for you? It must be important. Ask whatever you'd like. Up to half of the kingdom I want to give to you because I love you. And Esther says, oh, you love me? That's so nice. Okay, here's what I want. I want to invite you to a party, a dinner party. That's all I want. Can you come to a dinner party? Come, you, I, just me and you, and Haman. Haman, your advisor, that wicked Haman. I want him to come also. We'll have all three a party. And Achashverosh is like, okay, party, why Haman? Oh, he didn't say anything. He figures there's got to be a reason why. He'll find out. So that day Haman was summoned. That evening they came to the party, and there's Esther, there's Achashverosh, and there's Haman. And Haman is feeling so good about himself. Wow. Out of everyone in the entire kingdom, in the entire world, the only one invited to the party was Esther's husband, obviously, and him. He's feeling so good. And then in the middle of the party, Achashverosh, the king, turns to Esther and says, wow, Esther, what a nice dinner party. What would you like? There's got to be something I can give you. Again, up to half of the kingdom is yours. And Esther says, thank you so much. But you know what I would like? I want one thing. I want you to come to another party tomorrow. She was like, another party? You want me to come to another? Yes. And bring Haman again. And Achashverosh is weirded out by this whole party. He's inviting Haman. Haman is not weirded out at all. Haman expects this. Yeah, I'm an important dude. Of course they're going to invite me. And he leaves the party feeling awesome. He's walking on sunshine. And he is walking and he's feeling like $1,000,000. And yes, he's got all this power. He's got richness and he has honor. Now, Haman had a rule. And the rule was, after he became very famous, anyone who sees him has to bow down to him. And ever since he became big, ever since he was elevated to power, everyone had to bow down to Haman. And Haman actually had a little secret, which is like a well-known secret. He worshipped idols. He was an idol-worshipping egomaniac. But he had an idol, and he wanted everyone to worship his God, his idol. So what he did was, he took a little necklace, and he had the idol strapped to his necklace. And as people would pass Haman and they would bow down, they were bowing down not only to him, but they were bowing down also to the idol. Wow, that's amazing. So as he leaves the palace and everyone sees, here comes Haman, bow, bow, bow. You know what? There's a Jew there. And the Jew's name is Mordechai. And Mordechai never would bow down to Haman. Mordechai is not bowing down to a person, and certainly not to a person with an idol. Now, picture what happens. Haman's feeling like $1,000,000. He walks down the road. Everyone's bowing down. He is invited to 2 parties by the queen. He is so wealthy. He is so honored. And one Jew, Mordechai, will not bow down to him. And you know what happened in his mind? Everything changed. He got angry. He got upset. He was livid. And by the time he came home, he was so furious. He calls his wife, whose name was Zeresh, and he calls his advisors, and he says, I got all this honor. The queen has invited me again to a party. But you know what? None of it is worth anything to me as long as that Jew is alive mocking me. I can't wait a year for this Jew to die. I want to do something right now. So his advisor said, why don't you just build a gallows and ask the king permission to hang him? Haman thinks that's a great idea. And this gallows is not just going to be a regular gallows. It's going to be taller than any gallows in Shushan. I want the whole city to see a Jew dangling like a rag doll in the middle of town square. So right away he had workers go and they erected a 50 amma, that's 100-foot gallows to hang Mordechai on. And now he's excited. Tomorrow's going to be a great day, thinks Haman. Tomorrow I'm going to go to this party. Mordechai is going to be hanging from the gallows. The Jews are going to die. I am powerful. I'm beloved by the queen. I'm in good shape. Okay, are you all following the story? Because here's where everything flips on its head. Right? Okay, we good? It's hard to see the wall. Now you can see it, guys. Hi, guys. See a little bit clearer? Okay, all following the story? Okay, here's where everything falls apart for the wicked Haman. I love this part. Here we go. So, in order to ask permission, he's got to go to the king. And he's so excited to hang Mordechai that he wakes up early the next morning. And he goes to ask the king permission to hang Mordechai. That night, the king goes to sleep and he cannot fall asleep. He has insomnia. Can't fall asleep. King cannot fall asleep. They use the fan thingy on him. No, they massage him. King is not falling asleep. Something is troubling him. He almost feels like someone is out to kill him. And he thinks to himself, why? Why am I so troubled? And then he thinks, perhaps there was once somebody who did me a favor and I never paid them back. And now they're not telling me because maybe there's another plot to kill me, but they're not telling me because I never paid them back. For the first time they told me, open up my chronicles, my book of good deeds, people that have done good things for me. Let me go through this book. And the advisors took out his fat book of all those who had done good things for the king. And the book opened up to the page where Mordechai saved the king from the plot of Bigsan and Seresh that they wanted to poison him. Remember a few chapters back? They wanted to poison him. And the king said, wow, Mordechai saved me? What did we ever do to pay Mordechai back? And the advisor said, nothing. We never did anything for the Jew Mordechai. Just then, the king hears noise outside of his chamber. He says, someone's outside. Maybe they're trying to kill me. Maybe they're trying to take the kingdom. And the soldiers rush outside. And who do they see outside? They see it's Haman. And they grab Haman, they bring him in. And Haman, of course, was just coming to get permission to hang the very same Mordechai. So he's coming, he's about to ask to hang Haman, to hang Mordechai, when the king looks at him and says, what are you doing outside? Oh, you don't forget it, I don't even want to know. But he always suspected Haman's the guy I got to watch out for. So he looks at Haman and says, I got a question for you. Let's say there's somebody that I want to honor. What would I do for a guy like that? And Haman thinks to himself, well, if the king wants to honor somebody, it must be moi. Obviously, the queen loves me, people love me, people bow down to me. So instead of speaking about Mordechai for a moment, he just begins to paint a picture of what he would like. He said, wow, if somebody wants to honor the king, I would probably take the crown that the king wore on his coronation day and the garments that he wore on the day that he became the king, and maybe the steed, the horse that he rode on when he became the king. And I would have somebody take the reins of the horse and lead this person through the streets, maybe calling out in a loud voice, this is what is done to the person that the king wishes to honor. This is what is done. And the king said, wow. He says in his mind, wow, he really wants to take me over. Because clearly he thinks it's him. He wants my crown. He wants my horse. And he says, he turns to Haman and he says, wow, what a great idea. Everything that you just said, I want you to do to the Jew Mordechai. You take him, help him on a horse, lead him through town screaming that the king wants to honor that man. And Haman is baffled. He had come here to ask that Mordechai be killed, and now Achashverosh says, go, honor this guy Mordechai. Well, he comes to Mordechai, and Mordechai is still in a sackcloth. He's mourning, he's got ashes, he's not shaven, he's not a haircut. And Haman says, the king wants me to honor you, so get up, I'm putting you on the king's horse. And Mordechai understood at that moment that Hashem had listened to our prayers. So he says to Haman, well, I can't go on the king's horse like this. Didn't you used to be a barber, Haman? And it's true, Haman many years ago was a barber. He says, I need a nice haircut. So Haman begins to give him a haircut. I think I need a bath also. Maybe I'll help scrub my back. So here is Haman scrubbing his back, puts him on a horse, gets him dressed up, and Haman, this second to the most powerful person in all of Persia, now finds himself the town crier. That's what's called the crier, the one who pulls in front of the horse saying, this is what is done to the man the king wants to honor. And something really ironic happens. You see, Haman had a daughter, and the daughter is looking outside from the balcony, and she sees somebody is screaming, this is the one the king wants to honor, and somebody is sitting on the horse. And she couldn't see who was who, so she assumed, as the daughter of Haman, she assumed who's being led on the horse. Who is that person riding on the horse? It must be Daddy. Daddy must be honored. And who must be the one schlepping? It must be Mordechai. Mordechai, before he's being hung, he's got to be embarrassed. So you know what she does? This is really tough to hear. She takes her porta potty with all of its days collection, and she dumps it as the horse and the crier are passing her. She dumps it on the person who is leading the horse. All of the filth, all the excrement go all over the person. And that person, of course, is Haman. And Haman, as this excrement comes on him, he looks up, he sees it's his daughter. His daughter sees that she just dumped her porta potty on her father, and she jumps out off of the balcony to her death. Haman comes back after leading Mordechai, embarrassed, ashamed, stinking. He comes home and they said, what happened? I thought you were going to ask permission to hang Mordechai. What did you do? You were leading him on a horse? And Mordechai and Haman says, I don't know what happened. I am filthy. I gave him honor. I was embarrassed. And the advisor said, when you begin to fall to the Jewish nation, there's no coming back. This is bad news, Haman. Just then, there's a knock on the door. Knock, knock, knock. They open the door, and there are the king's officers. Haman, let's go. The queen is waiting. The king is waiting. He's, I need a shower. I'm full of stuff. No time, let's go. And Haman is brought to the palace. He just lost his daughter. He just was embarrassed and ashamed. He stinks. And he's brought in, and the king and the queen, like, P.U., what's going on? And the king, he's eating his food, and they're enjoying the second feast while keeping an arm's distance away from the stinky Haman. And then the king once again says to Esther, Esther, what would you like? Up to half the kingdom. I love you so much. And here are one of the most famous lines in all of Jewish history. Esther says, you know what I like? I just want my life. I'm requesting for my nation. Someone wants us dead. They want me dead. They want all of us dead. If they just wanted us to serve the king, to be slaves, I wouldn't say anything. But a person wants us dead, wants your queen. He wants your queen to be murdered. And the king says, really? Again, the king does not even know that she's Jewish. So to him, it's like someone wants the queen dead. And Esther says, yeah. You know who wants me dead? And she points right over here, points right at Haman. And she said, Ish tsar v'oyev Haman hara hazeh. This wicked, accursed, evil, conniving man. It's this wicked Haman. He wants to kill me. He wants to kill my nation. And Haman is sitting there shell-shocked. He was just sabotaged in front of the king. The king hears this, and in his mind, it all adds up. Of course, Haman wants to take me over. So part of taking me over is he wants my crown on his head. Part of taking me over is to kill my queen. The king leaves the chamber. He is stewing. He is angry. He's fuming, and he's walking in his garden like, what am I going to do? Here's my second in command, and he wants my wife, my queen killed. Well, Haman now finds himself alone in the room with Esther, and he knows he is toast. So he goes to Esther and he's, please don't do this. Don't do this. And you know what he does? He begs her so much, and she's lying on this like couch, like chair, where leaning back. He falls on her. He just falls on her. Please, please. Achashverosh, the king, comes back in the room to see what? To see Haman lying on his wife. And he says, are you going to conquer my wife in my own home in front of me? And Haman's face grew ashen, like he knew it. Just when you think it didn't get worse, it just got worse. And one of the advisors of the king, who was standing there minding his own business in the room, in the corner of the room, his name was Charvona, suddenly speaks up, and he says, by the way, king, besides lying on top of your wife, besides wanting to kill her in your own house, you see, if you look out your window, you'll see a gallows. You know what those gallows are? Those gallows are to kill the guy for saving you. He saved you, so Haman wants him killed. But those two things, the Mordechai who saved you, he wants to kill him. So Achashverosh says, you want to kill somebody because they saved me? Okay, take Haman and hang him this minute on those gallows. They handcuff him. They bring him to the center of town. They string him up and they asphyxiate him. They hang him in front of everyone. Imagine this. A day before, he was walking on sunshine. He was the most powerful person outside of the king. And today, he is hanging as a dead carcass. And at that point, the king says to the queen, what else can I do for you? And here's the end of the story. The queen says, thank you for taking care of the enemy, but we still have an issue. The decree was already sealed with your ring, and it says that all the Jews are going to die on the 14th of the month of Adar. That doesn't change just because Haman is hanging. The king says, I can't take it back. I sealed it. The only thing we can do is to create an opposing decree. And the opposing decree was that the Jews can fight back. And there was a decree that anyone who touches Jewish property, the Jews have the right to kill them. And even if they don't touch Jewish property, if there were enemies of the Jews and they said, we're going to kill you, the Jews have weeded out their enemies and they can destroy their enemies. And when everyone in the world got this proclamation, they were very confused because they had gotten one proclamation that said kill the Jews, and a new one said the Jews should kill their enemies. And people were so confused, they said, you know what? We're not touching this. The king is too mixed up. But the Jews did touch it. The Jews had heard who wanted them dead, and the day of Purim, which was a day that was designated and marked for Jewish death, was the day that the Jewish people attacked their enemies who came out with their anti-Semitism. All of those who wanted them dead, the Jewish people attacked and killed 10,000 well-known vicious anti-Semites. And not only were those 10,000 killed, but the 10 sons of Haman, who had acted as his generals, who were coordinating the whole pogrom, they were all hung. There was a Megillah that was written by Esther and Mordechai, and that Megillah was read. And the Megillah is what we read till today. We read the story of how Haman wanted us destroyed, and God flipped it. And instead, Haman and all the anti-Semites were destroyed on that day. The power of Jewish repentance flipped everything completely apart. And the day of Purim has been designated as the day where God can switch things in a heartbeat, in an instant, in a moment. We call that in Hebrew, v'nahapachu. Everything can flip in one moment.